mentioned that Jerry Brooks came to you and said, hey, I think you should run for council. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, he came.
What year was that?
1984, I think. And I thought that was kind of neat. You know, I just had a young family, and I thought, you know, I had my practice. It'd be kind of fun to do that. But I was very cautious. You know, I said, well, okay, you know, I don't want to run against anyone. And there was a council member, Coy Payne, that was on the council, and he announced that he was not going to run for re-election. So I said, okay, Jerry, I'll run for that open seat. You know, I'm a young whippersnapper. I don't want to run against someone like Coy Payne. You know, I had a lot of respect for him and things of that sort. So I dove into it. I remember, actually, in those days, you used to paint your campaign signs on hard wood. You silk screen them and things of that sort. There's a picture of doing it in the backyard of Jerry's house. He used to live in downtown Chandler. He had chickens in his backyard. And there's a picture, I carried my son in one of those baskets, my older son, plucked him down there, you know, because it was, you know, my wife said, well, you can go and paint. I think she can join me. And we'd spend all day painting, silk screening our signs, and painting actually the wood posts that you put the signs on. I mean, those signs, when they went up, you know, they were impossible to get out of the ground. But anyway, working hard in that campaign and just really excited about it. And then literally maybe 2 to 3 days before petitions were due, and I had turned in my petitions, I'd done everything, Coy Payne changed his mind and said, no, I'm going to run for re-election. I remember this day going, oh my goodness. So suddenly, thinking I was running for an open seat, and was no longer an open seat. And I was running at that time along with this individual who was running for the council for the first time. His name was J-Tip Shraney. I got to know him. We were running together, sort of. And so, you know, Jerry went out and recruited J-Tip Shraney, and myself were running for council. Of course, everyone gets on council. Jerry wins as mayor, and there's a runoff election. My worst nightmare, myself and Coy Payne. If you ever want to feel totally isolated in this world and alone, is to have a runoff election with only you and someone else, and everyone else has been elected, everything, all the other races are decided. You feel extremely alone. And you feel like it's a total waste of money. I mean, to have this is when we had standalone elections, so people were expected to come to the polling place and vote just for that one office. And it was just, and you're stuck, you know. So I did my best. You know, I've told this to Coy. You know, I found out very quickly those people who wanted me to run against Coy for certain reasons that I did not want associated with my campaign at all. You know, people who, you know, were, you know, who liked Coy, didn't like Coy. I certainly was the lightning rod. And I remember one individual knocking on my door, you know, and campaigning for Coy Payne, and I didn't know it was my door when I answered, and he told me, oh, you're not going to win. You're not going to win. Bob Robson. And I didn't know yet. You know, I became good friends with Bob afterwards. I just felt very alone. But I kept with it. I think it was a very clean campaign, and we talked about the issues, and I lost the campaign by 112 votes. And afterwards, when that campaign was over, I was so overjoyed, and decided I was going to run again. I wasn't going to go through that again. So then the mayor put me on planning and zoning, and I went on planning and zoning and loved it, and was there for 7 years, and ended up as a chairman for many, many years. And I was totally content. People said, well, you got to run again. I said, yeah, that was my taste. And in those days, I was a newcomer to the city of Chandler, and newcomers weren't expected to really be on the city council. I didn't have the history like Jay. I didn't have the history of Coy. I didn't have the history of Jerry Brooks even. Elections were decided by a certain downtown districts, and it was just, they were all looking at me saying, who are you?
It was a much smaller community.
very small town politics, small town politics, because population was, what, less than 50,000, wasn't it? No, 85, what was the, in 1980, I know the population was, I think, just under 50,000, because it hadn't blossomed yet.
30, I think.
Yeah, it was 35,000 or so. Yeah. So, you know, when I ran, it was about 50,000. That was a small town.
So when did you start on the planning and zoning commission?
That year, 7 years before I ran again, you know, something I didn't think I was going to do. Now, you know, there was a reason for that. But
So tell me, on the planning and zoning commission, I'm really curious about that time period, because you're talking like from 84 right to like 91 or so.
yeah, probably around, I think it was probably 86 to about 90, yeah, 91, 92. Right.
That was a period of pretty intense
Ah,
growth.
it was so exciting. It was so exciting to be on planning and zoning, because your meetings were long. We had our study sessions before we met, and we had so many great projects. These were the days of the master plan communities. You know, we did regional plans. You know, the railroad policy, remember, and the Southeast Chandler policy, and I started to be able to exercise this visioning thing. You know, for the first time, I could let's decide. The railroad policy was going to be our commercial corridor. Chandler was going to be our industrial corridor. Price Road, we had to preserve that for industry. Enjoyed it so much, but it finally dawned on me, and you know, it was, you got to put yourself in this. I enjoy talking to a lot of the West Valley mayors that are at the stage. You wanted retail development. We had no place to shop in the city of Chandler. We had no place to really go and eat. We went to North Mesa. We went to Tempe. We went to, you know, Fiesta Mall and things of that sort. You know, we were talking earlier about how big of an event it was when Smitty's came to town. That was it. That was our mall. That was, oh, you could actually go in that store and buy clothes and shop for groceries at the same time. Oh, we've arrived.
That was at Alma School in Warner?
Alma School and Warner. And then the first Walmart that came, oh, that was a big deal, you know. It was a Walmart, but hey, that's a lot of tax dollars. That was really our downtown, that whole area. You had a lot of restaurants, Chili's, and you know, you had those little village shops that were there that.
So that's that Walmart that's at the same location?
Yeah.
as the same-
And those village shops in the front of it was what it was designed to be before the Walmart came, and I took a major I refused to let those buildings go away. I don't know if it was a good decision or not, because they haven't really done much, but I like the character of those small little village, and I just, you know, Walmart wanted them torn down, and I said, you know, no, and I was able to convince the council of that. But what really dawned on me is that the philosophy then was to bring in rooftops, bring as many homes as you can, because the more people we bring to town, then we'll have the mall eventually be built. We'll have the retail. Retail will only come when you have a lot of people living in the area. So we got into this process of approving homes where I suddenly said, what are we doing here? Are we just counting rooftops or building neighborhoods? We were building homes on lots that were no wider than 60 feet wide. You had homes that the garage door was the only thing you saw. You had to go to the side of the house to find the front door. You had homes that were, you know, 10 feet apart. And what we were finding out is that we were getting an overload of they're important, you know, the starter homes are important. But the city of Chandler was where you had the starter homes. And then people, when they had their families, would move to Gilbert, because Gilbert had larger homes. Or they'd move to South Tempe and things of that sort. And I started saying, you know, what are we doing here? You know, and I had disagreements with staff that kept on saying, no, got to build rooftops. And developers would come in and say, oh yeah, we'll give you a little park in the middle, but you got to give us this high density. And so we organized tours. I said, let's go out and look at neighborhoods in other communities, or even in Chandler, but South Tempe and things of that sort. Neighborhoods that people have lived in their homes for 20 years or more, and decide why. Because we had people that lived in homes, these homes probably for about 4 or 5 years, and they're gone. As soon as they had children, there was no room to even put a swing set in the backyard. There's no room to add on to your home. If you go in these older neighborhoods, like in the old neighborhoods of Tempe, even with you know, what you call production homes, they had large enough lots where you could add a wing, add a bedroom, and people stayed there, and the neighborhoods were more sustainable. So we finally got to the conclusion that you have to, there's no need to have small lots. You can tell developers no. You can have the standard single-size lots. You can tell developers you're going to have to do something other than stucco and tile. People, the stories are infamous about people who come up to the front door and they realize they're at the wrong house. Homes look the same. Developers are doing the same thing. Why can't you build homes with different color roofs? Why not build homes with front porches? Why not? Developers said no. People won't buy them. I remember a Scottsdale developer coming before planning and zoning. I said, why? We had trouble with shingles on roofs that would just curl up and go away in 5 years. It looked horrible. And I said, why don't you put tile roofs on houses? And his remark was, this is not Scottsdale. And I said, oh, heck it is. And I started requiring tile roofs. Now, I don't know if that was good or bad, because now we have tile roofs on everything, even doghouses. But it bothered me that developers were looking at Chandler a certain way. And then we heard from our business community that, when Intel bring their business executives here to Chandler, they couldn't find homes. They had to go, and they were living in Gilbert. So why did I run for city council? 2 reasons. Actually 3. Well, 2. Well, the realization I found out, finally it dawned on me that our votes were not necessarily final. We're a recommending body. And when I had a few votes that were overturned, 1 vote, and I won't get into specifics because I love my council members back then, it was a rezoning of a major commercial site that was going to be designed for where the Arizona Mills was going to go, and it was going to be the Chandler Mills. And they changed the zoning and put homes in an area that was designed to be retail. And it was a unanimous decision of the planning and zoning, and the council reversed that unanimously. And staff objected to it and everything. And it finally dawned on me, if I'm going to have any sort of lasting input in this, I'm going to have to be in a position where my decision counts. And we're going to have to change policies. We're going to have, we got to change how we build homes in this area. So I ran for council again, and that was in 1990 something. And was on council for 8 years. And I ran. I was successful this time without a runoff. That's what I was praying for, please. And 94. And ran, and there was an open seat, and Jay had finished his 8 years as a council member, or was now running for mayor, and came on board. And Jay said, "You have a lot of passion about the zoning stuff. Go for it." And those first years were so much fun because we adopted the residential design standards for homes. We decided to force this on developers, where you build on a 7,000 square foot lot, period. And then we want different designs, you have to meet certain criteria. We wanted different looking homes. We wanted different floor plans. I was told at that time that there were 5 floor plans that were built in the city of Phoenix. They just looked different. They'd put different color stucco and tiles. They didn't do anything different. And we were told that's what people wanted, but that was not true. When they started doing these new homes that looked different, looked like the old-fashioned homes, the front porches and garage doors that weren't predominantly in the front, we adopted those guidelines. There was a director of the planning department at that time, or a long-term planning director, Hank Pluster. I mean, he was marvelous. He was in heaven, because never before was he ever given. He developed these policies. I mean, he just was having the time of his life, because we were doing this type of planning that other cities just ignored. But again, I thought it was important. If we're going to follow Tempe's plan, let's do that. We did impact fees. The first city that did comprehensive impact fees, found ways to pay for the growth. We were sued over it. We survived. We did impact fees soon enough where we had enough money to eventually build things. We did commercial design standards. We were sick and tired. Every commercial corner looked the same. So we encouraged developers to do something different. Now, most of the developers had a negative attitude. I had one developer say, well, I'll never build in Chandler again because of the impact fees, because of the design standards. There was one developer that stood up And we went around speaking together, and that was Fulton. Fulton said, I remember, I'll never forget it, he actually thanked the council, thanked all of us. He said, thank you for those design standards, because you are forcing us to go out and do things that we wanted to do, but we couldn't have convinced anyone else to do it. And it took off. People loved the new neighborhoods that we're building, the larger lot homes and things of that sort. And it was because of one developer who said, he went out and said, it's okay, it's fine. You know, of course, everyone continued building homes here. Developers got used to it. Now they love it. And other cities adopted. We've shared our design standards all over the valley.
When were those design standards implemented?
Like in the year or two after I got on board. And we did the design standards. We've upgraded them since. We've done commercial design standards. We did the big box ordinance after we had a few Walmart issues, and that has been a model. Staff did a wonderful job in coming up with a big box ordinance that resolved that issue pretty much. But we found out, and maybe, you know, to some degree, I carried my planning too much. I remember one of the council members leaned over to me, and because I used to advocate, and I did this only to make a point. Why don't we use red brick? Of course, I kid with fire because I finally got my red brick building out of the new fire administration building. But my point was, why not use different materials when you build your homes? Why do we always have to be stuck with stucco? Who invented stucco? You know why we use stucco? It's cheap and quick. And because we don't have cold weather out here, you can get past. But why not do more? So you have a lot more brick facades, and especially the retail and things of that sort. But someone once told me that, you know, you got to tone down the zoning a little bit on council, because, you know, council does have to make decisions that, you know, may be based on costs and things of that sort. But in those early years, I just had a heyday of just bringing all these pent up passions I had on planning and zoning and be able to get them in a format. And I found out quickly, staff is always staff wants to do this great sort of planning stuff, but it takes the policymakers to say, go for it, to get it done. Mm-hmm. And we did. It was fun.
And just one more thing about when you were on the commission, what do you think were one or some of the most important decisions made while you served on the commission that's really impacted Chandler?
I think a couple of things. You know, one, with the help of council, obviously, is that we preserved the area where the Chandler Fashion Mall was going to be built. We're patient enough. You know, West Cora always owned that property, but, you know, we could have done something different. You know, it was, you always get pressure to build homes everywhere. The other area that we preserved, and I'll give credit to council too, because again, it started planning and zoning, was to say no to any residential development along the Price Corridor. This came up so often because what a great place. You know, I live very close to the Price Corridor at Germain and Dobson. I love the area because you can just get on the Price Corridor and go anywhere you want to, and it's a great area. But you'd had a lot of home development along there. So coming up with you know, the railroad policy and things of that sort, again, all that type of visioning where you could say to a developer, because developers are great as long as you give them guidance. And we found out that the best way to develop is to tell the developer what your expectations are. That's all they want. If you don't, they'll do what will fit, especially, and you made this comment, especially when we had more out-of-state builders coming into town. It was okay. When you dealt with hometown developers, they kind of shared, they wanted their neighborhoods to look great and look great for many years to come because they would be here to hear about it. Out-of-state developers could care less. So it was great to be able to plot down, here are our standards, here's the railroad policy, here's this thing. You build like this and we'll be happy with it. And until you do, you know, don't come to council. So staff loved it because they could say, this is the way, or the highway. Very few people took the highway because they all wanted to be in Chandler because of the growth that was happening.
Mm-hmm. And all the potential there.
Oh, potential. Yeah. I can't tell you how many developers saying, no, especially retail, you know, large department stores, things of that sort. No, we're not going to build a building. We build our corporate image that we build in Minnesota and we build here. No. Well, we'll go elsewhere. Fine. They don't. And they build it our way.
So, as you were serving on council, do you have any, I know a lot of things happened during that time on council, but what are some of your most significant memories from your time on council?
Before I was mayor? A couple. A lot of successes. I mean, those were the days when we were just staying ahead of the growth. I mean, what's great about, I remember going back after those years as mayor and commenting to a lot of mayors back east, you know, the fact that Chandler was, what, 35,000 people in 1980, and now we're, you know, over 100,000, 200,000. It's so hard for people to comprehend unless you're in this area. As, you know, cities don't grow like that back east. And the first thought was, how did you do it? How did you control it? You know, people would ask, can you control growth? No, you can't. You know, you can't build walls around your city. But if you develop standards and guidelines and things of that sort, our city is going to max out 50,000 less people than we would have had, was predicted in the 70s. And that's a lot of people. That's okay. Because we weren't building houses on top of houses, especially with the southern part of Chandler. A couple of memories back then. Our first police officer that we lost, that was shot and in duty, was James Snedeker, and that was a tough thing for Chandler to go through. We lost, to some degree, a lot of innocence, thinking that could never happen here, and that happened when I was on the council. Now, it happened twice when I was mayor, you know, with Rob Nielsen and Carlos Ledesma, badges 445 and badges 600. The first year I was elected as mayor, and the last year of my term. And those are so difficult to go through because they're opposite extremes. You go through an enormous sense of loss, and you can't believe it's happened. You know, you get angry, but then how the community rallies around the officers' families and the police department. You know, the thoughts of seeing those people lining up along the funeral route, just paying respects. It brings the community together too. But that was tough. But you know, it tells you that we've become a big urban center, and those things are going to happen. And then probably the most significant memory I had was a roundup. I hate to use that word. That happened when I was on the council, and some of those issues I still dealt with as mayor. A very difficult thing to go through for a couple of reasons. I think it became very political, not from us, but from an attorney general that did the investigation, but I thought did it in a way that didn't really get to the facts. You know, our police department was heavily criticized unfairly during that period of time. A lot of very good officers were kind of just brought into a situation. It got very emotional. Certainly it had issues. But because of that, you know, current issues we're able to talk about a lot more effectively because of, you know, we've been through it. And it did open doors when I was mayor. Something I haven't talked about extensively, but I worked very closely with the White House on this issue of immigration reform. Because my concern was, if you're going to do a comprehensive immigration reform, it was not an issue of how I felt about that. It was more of an issue of local law enforcement, what our role should be. Don't put immigration responsibility on our police officers necessarily. We're certainly part of the equation, but we're also out protecting people and doing things of that sort. And had some very, very frank discussions with the president in the Oval Office, one-on-one, about what our experience was. And by being from the state of Texas, you know, he had similar concerns and things of that sort. And of course, we've updated our policy since then. One of the things I did as mayor to clarify that issue.
Can you, for the purposes of of the interview, thinking of someone who might come back and see this interview at some point and not really know what the roundup was exactly. Can you talk a little bit about what initially started that whole event and how it played out?
Well, yeah, it was a situation where, I think the police chief, Bobby Joe Harris, was responding to concerns that came from certain parts of the city, and actually came from Hispanic citizens who were upset with things that they were observing in terms of perhaps some degree of criminal activity and things of that sort. And something that local law enforcement was doing in conjunction with the Justice Department, the federal, back then, whether it was ICE or Immigration Services, were actually doing to some small degree. They would come out and involve local law enforcement to look at, look for drop houses and, those worst scenarios, involving the coyotes and things of that sort. Some, perhaps even some degree, criminal activity. But our police chief decided to, and I think he was brought into the whole process and did a much more extensive process, and I think went out, and no one really knows exactly what may have happened because you heard different stories from different sources, but did a more broad effort of just basically going out and asking people to prove their citizenship, and did it out of the ordinary course of how things are done, and did it more independently of the immigration services, and caused a lot of ill feelings of people who were citizens who were being asked to prove it, and being asked in places that were not the normal locales, and caused a lot of poor feelings, and then found out afterwards that maybe it was lack of control in the process, lack of communication, and it can show how quickly something like that can cause some ill feelings in your community. But as a result, we responded to that. We reached out to the Hispanic community. We formed the Human Relations Commission. It's been very successful, and the police department, I think, has an excellent relationship with the Latino community in a lot of ways. They realize that that there has to be, there are ways of dealing with that issue on a local level, that you have to have certain concerns and certain procedures in place to make certain that people's constitutional rights are at least protected. I mean, it's a balancing act, and you can certainly enforce the law, but do it in a way that that can reflect our Constitution, both federal and state.
And were there kind of national implications as far as publicity and that kind of thing in regards to this particular?
Oh, enormous. When I traveled as the mayor, when I mentioned I was from Chandler, oh yes, Roundup. We were called a sanctuary city, which I hate that phrase because it's used in a way that that doesn't make a lot of sense, and we're no more a sanctuary city than any other city. So there's a lot of strong feelings on this issue, and which I share to some degree, but it's always a question of, yes, maybe there is an illegal element to it, obviously, but it's a question of who should be involved. And again, I think everyone agrees it is a federal issue. Whether you feel strongly about securing the border, or you feel who should be involved in the actual enforcement of the law, it does fall on the shoulders of the federal government eventually. We may feel like they're not doing what they should be doing, but eventually, if they decide to do whatever they want to do, it is a federal question.
Do you feel like this particular issue and the circumstances around it, and then kind of lessons learned from it, do you think that made any impact at the state level? Maybe with the county, the sheriff, any of that kind of stuff?
I've had my discussions, yeah. On most recently on 1070, there's a trailer bill that I was very involved with as a league president, and I sat down with Senator Pierce and talked about certain issues that had just to be addressed a little differently. I mean, you know, if you're going to have local enforcement, there needs to be just some issues that need to be addressed just to be able to have uniform enforcement. Because every city is different. Every city police department may have similarities but also differences. So there were some things that were changed in that law that, and that's where my concern was. You know, if we're going to be involved locally, then you know we should be at the table. We should be helping form the law. That's what I said to Senator Pierce. I'm not here to object to the law. I'm here to, if you're going to make the law, then we just need to make certain that there are elements that make sense. And there's always that financial aspect, because it's, you know, if you want local government to be enforcing certain laws as a mandate from the state, you know, there's going to be a cost associated with it. So that's another issue.
You feel like that conversation was productive?
To a certain degree.
Yeah, I'm just curious to know, like, you know, if it seemed like what happened in Chandler, if there's any thoughts about that at the state level with recent legislation.
Well, we had some discussions of whether, you know, there are some people who are unhappy that we actually settled the lawsuit, thinking that we didn't do anything wrong, and that, you know, I think when Chandler did that exercise, there were a lot of comments from other police departments saying, you know, wow, you know, yeah, enforcement. You know, we all agree that all aspects of the law needs to be enforced, and including immigration law. I mean, I have no question with that, and it should be enforced. It's a question of who should be doing it, and coordinating all the various. I mean, the state could be involved, DPS, why not involved, as well as ICE and as well as local. But you're going to have people kind of stepping on each other. I'm kind of an organization sort of guy. I mean, if you want to do it, then let's get all the parties together and figure out how to most effectively do it. And I think the final resolution of this issue is that there needs to be security at the border. I mean, there needs to be, you know, obviously there needs to be ways to prevent all the situations that we think are horrible, especially the drop houses, the coyotes, the recent thing we found in Chandler where there's, you know, people are just stuck in a home, and there's a whole industry out there dealing with illegal immigration that needs to stop, whether it's related to drugs or otherwise. It is out of control, and that does take police work, including the federal government, to stop that, so then we can sit back and address the other issues.
I know we were talking previously about kind of moments in national history. And we had another one of those moments in national history on September 11th, 2001. And I wonder what you remember about that time. You know, where were you at on that day, and what are you remembering from that time? From that time period?
Well, I was here just watching TV. Yeah, it was one of those moments that you're kind of watching and just wondering, you know, is this real or not? No one really knew what was happening. I've talked to some staff people that were traveling at that time, and I think our police chief then was traveling, and it took her days to find a way to get back home. It's kind of scary, especially my son going into the Navy and he's going to, you know, be a pilot. You're concerned with that. Of course, talking to him about the reaction to the most recent history, you know, involving the Navy SEALs. I mean, he has friends who are going into that branch. So it's, yeah, I think it's just changed America, and it's changed every aspect of America, even on local level. I mean, we have more concerns and things of that sort. One of the things we haven't done in Chandler, which I just didn't really have I just have a problem with, is doing any sort of security for council meetings and things of that sort. Other cities have gotten a lot more security, metal detectors and things of that sort. I just think, you know, local government needs to be open, and I've shied away from that. And during my term as mayor, I mean, staff has asked whether we needed to do that sort of thing, and I said no. So You try to be as normal as you can, and that's my frustration. I mean, it's how an act like that has changed American society so much. It's sad. When I worked back in D.C. in the 70s, I mean, you could walk into the Capitol building freely, just walk right in and out, and we had no metal detectors or anything. That's not that long ago. You know, now you can't even go into the Capitol building. You have to go in the visitor center and be led around like a bunch of sheep. You know, it's sad. That's our capital, and it's sad that someone else has changed American society so much.
Well, let's talk about you running for mayor.
Running for mayor.
And what year was it that you decided to run for mayor, and why?
Well, I was termed out. I felt there were things that I certainly wanted to continue. It was 2002. So I made that decision, and I thought, you know, for the longest time, I thought being mayor was just basically moving your seat to a different location on the council. I don't think anyone realizes there's a difference. It's just an enormous amount of difference. Not necessarily under our charter. You know, I have one vote like anyone else. I don't have any veto power. You go back east and you see the mayor. The mayor, like Philadelphia, the mayor is actually like a pseudo governor. I mean, the council makes choices. The mayor can veto. The mayor is more of an executive position. We don't have that out here. But for people who come to Chandler, and those who want to, it's a bully pulpit that is still, being a mayor is just enormously difference, and has enormous difference in that light. And then being involved on a regional level, we'll talk about that. It's probably where more mayors are getting involved, because they see they can make a real difference in a lot of issues. But once I became mayor, I think there was, Chandler had now changed from a rural community to an urban one. And again, this visioning thing, we had to change our vision because we were facing build out. One thing I knew, that once you're built out as a city, that's your vision. It's done. You can do some sort of redevelopment stuff, but you can't really change a lot of what has been built and what you are as a city. And so I felt very strongly we need to now even look at this visioning thing even more so. We need to decide exactly, okay, what are we going to be? We're not going to be a Scottsdale. We're not going to have the resorts and things of that sort. It all came down to quality of life. What can we bring into the city of Chandler to have that quality of life that we still are going elsewhere for? And then jobs. I became so convinced, especially with the wars that we had on retail. Retail is important, tax dollars are important, but cities were fighting over stores and malls and things of that sort. If you're around here long enough, you know that malls go away. You know, what's the mall in Scottsdale that we all went to all the time?
Tri-City.
No, not Tri-City, the one up in Los Arcos. That was a big thing. I was there for the day opening. No longer exists. Fiesta Mall is hanging by a string. Tri-City Mall, poof, gone. Our malls have about a 20-year lifespan. Hopefully, you know, we'll talk about that too. That's a different subject. I think you can lengthen the lifespan if you do things ahead of time. But you bring in quality jobs, like an Intel, it's here for 20, 30 years. You bring in, and what it became evident is that if you bring in well-paying jobs, and you bring in people who make good money, and they spend their money here, and they want to eat here, they want to shop here, they want to get involved in the community, they want to get involved in Boys and Girls Club, it has a much lasting effect than bringing in a Nordstrom's. I love it. So we had a different mindset. So we had to focus on economic development, and that is really the current focus most cities are now realizing. It's not the big boxes that create your success, it's the corporations that you bring in, the quality of those jobs, and keeping and bringing in people who want to live in your community and live there and work there and play there and things of that sort. Then the other thing I was very concerned with is that we were putting off a lot of the infrastructure that I thought we needed for the quality of life. We had a lot of things approved, but it's hard to, we've got to get them built. And it's kind of scary because there's costs associated with it. But I thought it's important because we're facing build out in about 7 years. Been a little longer now because of the recession. But we didn't have things that other cities had. We built our Tumbleweed Recreational Center. I mean, even Gilbert had a recreational center. And that, that's a cost, there's an ongoing cost, but it's been so well received. The Playtopia, the building out of the Tumbleweed, the lake that's going to be built in Tumbleweed for skiing purposes, that's enormously important. We need those recreational opportunities. We had to have a new Boys and Girls Club. That was a major goal of mine. I mean, what we were using was literally falling down, and we got that done. Of course, City Hall had to be built. We always found a reason not to build it, which was logical reasons. I was part of those decisions. Let's build another mid-rise in downtown. Let's build another mid-rise in downtown. Be the major lessee of that. But this time it made sense to build the City Hall. And it's sometimes hard just to say, let's do it. Even, especially with the recession, a lot of explanation had to be done why that's the best time to do it. And it was. A lot of parks that we had to build. Things like, we don't have a golf course. We found a way to do a golf course with Bear Creek with the county. Why not build a BMX bike park? Why not? Other cities haven't done it. We were told, you can't build a separate bike park and a skate park because they're going to want to be together. No, not. And staff did a wonderful job in going out and building what I think are the best amenities that we can have. Let's get our landfill into a park. No, it's crazy. What? No. I have found a long time ago, we have such a great staff here in the city of Chandler. If you say, just do it, they get so excited, and doing it better than anyone else around, literally. Building the environmental educational center. People have not been out there with a Veterans Oasis Park. That is one of those jewels in the valley. So we got into a major construction phase because I just wanted to get it done, and the council did too. So we told staff, let's get these things built. Let's get those facilities up and running, along with job creation. So that was our vision right then. We did the Vision 21 with Mary Jo. We decided that we needed to get things done on an economic standpoint, building areas for future jobs, get our facilities in place, get our parks built, bring in those cultural amenities that are always the last things that we think about. We remodeled the Performing Arts Center. That's great. I hope that someday we even have another Performing Arts Center, but for now that's one of the most practical and Performing Arts Centers, and certainly we get a lot more use out of it than any other facility in town. So that was our vision in when I became mayor. Build out is going to happen. We better get our act together and start building those things that we promised our citizens.
How about a museum?
Museum is one of those items that we could sit and have a separate show on. The important thing to think about the museum is that we got to keep in mind that we have, I think, collectively across the city of Chandler, one of the best museums in the valley. I love what we've done with at Tumbleweed, the Pioneer Village. That's one of the biggest secrets in town. I love going out there on a Saturday and just visiting those homes, going out for the kettle cook-off. We ran out of food the last time we did it. The train museum needs to be a focus point. Our kiosks with all the parks are done so well. You get more of an appreciation, I think, by going to where something was and reading about it than going to a building and trying to figure out where it was. Okay. I'm getting to the museum though. Certainly the Price House was a key element. I think that, when funding comes back, we can have that more visible. We have a museum that's spread out throughout our city, and you've done an unbelievable job. Chandler will need a museum someday, and the big hurdle for that is not the cost of building it, but the cost of maintaining it. One of the things I pushed for when I was mayor and got very close was to do I think you get I think you get a bigger bang if you do a museum that brings in other aspects of, my vision was to have a historical museum that would be tied to a world-class art museum, and even a branch of the Herd. And our discussions with the Herd weren't successful. They went to the west side, but apparently if we had them here, they'd probably be closing because of the economy. The economy has been a bummer in this whole thing. We'll talk about that too. Came very close. I have this vision someday that the Basha Art Collection could be part of the downtown, part of the museum. Could you imagine having a first-class art museum of that sort, like you'd have in, where's the art museum in Oklahoma City? That's one of the major tourist draws in the country. I've had people say that the Bash Art Collection rivals that. I've had discussions with Eddie so many times, gotten this close. And I still think, and we have plans in place, and I think that's going to be something that, will hopefully be built soon. And when the economy comes around, it's a definite financial commitment on an annual basis if you do a first-class museum. But I think if you do art/history museum, citizens are going to feel more comfortable with that, and you're going to have a lot of people coming. I mean, when I go to the science, when I go to the Science Museum in downtown Phoenix, I used to go to the Phoenix History Museum next door because it was there, and visit all the Rosenhaus and all that stuff. And I think the museum is closed, isn't it now? But I think those are the type of things that once the economy comes back, like improving our bus system, improving museums, those amenities will get back on the front burner. And that was maybe the biggest disappointment. From a fiscal standpoint, we couldn't, until we could find a way not to only build it. You hate to build something and then not open it because you can't find the money it takes to run it in a first-class way. That's the hurdle you have to get over. Mm-hmm. And we will. We will.
During your time as mayor, you already started to talk about this to some degree. What was your vision for Chandler?
My vision of Chandler was obviously to build a city of the highest possible quality, first-rate city. You hate to compare yourselves to other cities, but I think our city has all the quality and amenities of any city, whether it's a Tempe, Scottsdale, Mesa, whatever. Our neighborhoods are as, not only the new neighborhoods, but you have to focus on the older neighborhoods and make certain they're sustained well. We have a great neighborhoods program, HOA program, traditional neighborhood program. The Habitat for Humanity homes that were being built in the older part of the city, focusing on building, at least 5 homes a year for 5 years, I think we impacted that community. Realizing that we don't have the resorts, but we have the type of employment, jobs that puts Chandler on the map. When you go and talk about Chandler, it's the Intels, the eBays, and cities are realizing that's important. It's all about balance. You want to have quality neighborhoods, with a wonderful recreation park system, so you have and jobs. You can literally encourage people to work, live, and play in one city. If you achieve that balanced community, you're going to be successful. It's where one of those elements are not there that you struggle as a city. If you have lousy neighborhoods, then that's not good. There are cities that have great neighborhoods, but no one works there. So you have all the transportation issues. Tempe wrestles with that, and it's not their fault. Most of the transportation they have are people who are driving through Tempe to get somewhere else. That's why freeways were so important in Chandler. So my vision is to build a city that's healthy, that's well-balanced, that has good jobs, great retail. I want to be able to go anywhere I want to, whether it's a Walmart, Nordstrom's, all the restaurant opportunities in my city. And I think we're getting there. And once the recession is over, hopefully some of the things we've lost will come back to the older retail centers and things of that sort. Reinvent those retail centers if you have to. We've talked about that. always, always trying to stay ahead of what may happen otherwise. You do not want, and I want to use Fiesta Mall area as an example, but someone assumed that that would always be there. You can never assume that. And that's why you need to always, we cannot get to the point, for example, our mall is wonderful. It's one of the best ones in the state. Chandler Fashion Center. I have some concerns about what's happening around that fashion center. You may want to look at, bring in new office and new retail opportunities. The Rockefeller development is an example. You may want to, talk about a conference center there or downtown. You always have to be reinventing those areas to make certain it meets the needs for the future. If you just say, hey, we've arrived, we don't have to do anything more, you're going to find instantly that something has changed and that it's too late for you to do anything. So I think if you're always looking at how to make that viable for the future, for the next 5 years, 10 years, you'll be okay.
What were some of the sort of the major issues in Chandler when you were mayor? I think the economy probably is going to be one of those, but what were some of the major issues that you and the council kind of had to deal with over those years?
Well, the recession was tough, but it's a good news, bad news sort of thing. I mean, the recession's been tough for a lot of citizens, our home values and things of that sort. But if you compare how it's affected Chandler with other communities, you can look at you can feel like the decisions that other councils made in the past, especially on the financial end. One of the things I learned early on is that you adopt financial principles that will do you well in good times as well as bad times. Now, never in our wildest dreams did we feel like we'd have a recession. But if you've been out here long enough, you know that there's this pendulum that swings back and forth. We've had recessions beforehand, but nothing is this bad. But we went through one in the 80s and things of that sort. And what I saw from cities that survived them well is that they were prepared for them. They didn't do silly things. One of the biggest silly things cities do is when they get a lot of money, they start spending it. They spend one-time money on ongoing expenses. They start hiring a lot of employees. Well, if you get in a downturn, what does that mean? You have to let a lot of employees off, and that's tough. So City of Chandler has remained lean. We're still one of the lowest per capita in terms of employees, and I don't apologize for that, because I think we have quality employees that do a great job, even with less people there perhaps helping out. We don't use, whenever we build something, we always find a source of how it's going to be paid for. That's the museum example. Till we can find that source, I think it would be foolish to build something. Other cities do, and then they close it up. Use one-time money for one-time purposes. You save one-time money. I mean, a lot of cities don't save any funds at all, especially back east. That's unheard of. But we did. We used impact fees. We could build City Hall without, essentially by cash. We could build things now because we saved for those things. So good financial policies get you through the hard years, and I think we're going to come out okay. I mean, we've had voluntary layoffs. We haven't had to lay off the number of people that other cities have done. We've preserved our services pretty much intact, and I'm gonna miss though. And I think in the next year or so, it's gonna be a lot more fun. We'll bring back a lot of the programs and services that we had to kind of put on the back burner a little bit. But we got through it. It was tough. It was tough. I tell you, it was tough to work with the various interest groups and including the unions, and I hope they see one day that we had to kind of tighten our belts there for a while.
Well, were there any significant events or developments kind of regionally that affected Chandler during your political career?
What I found, to answer your first question a little bit more, we went through some tough issues. I remember some of the Walmart issues. A lot of passion when people feel that their neighborhoods are going to be affected, whether it's true or not, whether there's some other side issues there, we don't know, or you do know. But the landfill issue was a major one. you know, the Lovelace shooting was really tough, not only with the shooting itself and what that meant to the officer and the surviving family. It was a spotlight on the police department that was tough to get through. There's a lot of passion on both sides. And what I found during that process, and I believe in this so hardly, is, and if you have issues like that, then you invite everyone to that podium and you talk about it. You let both sides be heard. There were times when I was actually told very strongly that it was inappropriate to allow certain people to come and speak. I feel you can come to that podium and speak about anything. And it's amazing when people have a chance to vent. Now, there are some times when you have to remind people to not bring in personalities or things of that sort. But if you know, I think our principles in this country work. Once people feel like they have a chance to voice their opinion, then you can make a decision that people can buy into. It's amazing. You know, once you make that Walmart decision, you hear from everyone. At least they feel like they had their chance to speak. They had their input. You had maybe some adjustment in your decisions. Obviously, you hear from everyone. It may be a hard thing to go through, but if you go through it and allow people to express their opinion, you can get through those tough times. It's not easy, but you end up with a result that you have buy-in and you move on, and I think people feel like they've been part of the process. Regional basis, well, one of the most gratifying things I did as a mayor is to get involved in a regional basis. And unfortunately, before we extended the term for mayor, you know, mayors like Jerry Brooks and Coy Payne never had a chance, because we had a mayor could be around for 4 years, and that was it. And you can't get into any leadership position on a regional basis in 4 years. But once a mayor could be around for 8 years, or even for my situation, 8.5 years, because of the change in state law, I had that privilege of getting on board. Right off the bat, Meg, the mayors got together and put together a transportation plan, regional plan, which many of us, when we started doing that, we thought it was going to be impossible to do. I remember sitting around saying, there's no way that a city can say, I will give up something I really want so that you have something that you want. The west side needed freeways. The east side said, we have our freeways. We want rapid transit. We want rail and buses. It took 2 years of sitting around a table, and we finally got to the point where we were willing to give something up on a regional basis, because we kept on reminding ourselves that that our citizens they want to be able to travel to Phoenix and Scottsdale and Gilbert and even to the Cardinal Stadium. And they get upset when they cross a border and can't get someplace, whether it's a freeway or whether there's a bus system or the like. So we have started thinking more regionally. And we got that system, we passed it, we got it through the legislature, the governor signed off on it, and we've stuck with it. Now, we had many discussions where we'd say, well, can't we forget this and do this? No, there are priorities. It's very detailed. This happens before that. This happens first. And we've stuck with it, and it's paying its dividends. And when the money comes back, you're going to see a lot more transportation projects. And when it comes to transportation, that was another key component that I felt was necessary. We had to get our freeways done and out of the way. Plus, they had to be done. I had a major fight with ADOT because ADOT did not want to put rubberized asphalt down. ADOT didn't want to put landscaping in. ADOT didn't want to put walls in. You can't blame them. They just want to put the basics. If you want anything extra, you pay for it. No. You've done it for one city, you do it for all. And thank goodness, Governor Napolitano came to and joined forces with the mayors, and we now have rubberized asphalt everywhere. It's made an enormous difference. And we got our HOV lanes. We'll be the first city, certainly outside of Phoenix, where all our freeways will have HOV lanes connected at the interchanges. That was huge. But that was one of our projects under the Proposition 400 that had to be done now. It was construction ready. We got federal funds, and we grabbed them, and we fought for them. And so our freeways with the HOV lanes open and all rubberized asphalt, they're done. Now we have to look at our buses. We got our rapid bus line down Arizona Avenue. That was Proposition 400 situation. That's tied into the light rail. We'll get light rail someday down, hopefully, Arizona Avenue. What we need is a bus system. That'll be one of the things that we may have to return to our voters and ask about a dedicated revenue source in terms of expanding and completing our bus system. Because that is done, there has to be some local contribution if you want to speed that process up. And we'll get there. Because our system has had to be cut a little bit because of the lack of resources. But we've looked at how other cities have done it. We'll see a way of doing neighborhood connections and things of that sort. But that's really what our options are going to be in the future, transportation-wise. Improve our intersections, which do enormous, it's amazing. We were the first city to do that, and now other cities are copying us because you don't have to expand those roads and take away neighborhoods. Just expand those intersections, and boy, it just opens up what you have there already. And so those are key improvements. They're not cheap, they're not easy, but it's a whole lot better than going down and expanding Chandler Boulevard